Philip, our third, he turned 16, and if you're 16 and you've already got your permit, one of the things that you'd like to do is go to the DMV. And honestly, where better could you spend your birthday than at the Department of Motor Vehicles? I get it. Anyway, we had looked, and apparently we looked too late to see about trying to get an appointment, to try to get an appointment with the DMV for him to, because you got to have a road test as you turn 16. And we didn't have that, but they said you could do walk-ins starting at noon. And I had good experience with the Thomasville driver's license office. Some of you might have tried that one out as well compared to some of the Greensboro locations. And I got him out of school early, and so it's his birthday. This is all exciting. We're going to head down there, and we get, it takes about 30 minutes, I guess, roughly, to get there. And it's just, I don't know, 20 till 12 or so, I guess, we get there, and we figure there might be some folks in line, and so certainly there were probably 30, 35 or so that are already in line, and it's outside, and it's snaking through the parking lot. And as we get in line, we're waiting until noon happens, because then they're going to open the doors. And so noon happens, and they open the door, and there were a couple of people that came in. And I told Philip, I said, my back's hurting. I'm going to go sit in the car for a little bit, and you just hold our spot in line. And so I go sit in the car for probably 30 or 40 minutes, and I discover that during that time, nobody else walks in. And so while I'm sitting there, I get on my phone, and I see that, because it'll show the wait time at other DMV offices. And I look, and it says that the Asheboro location has a less than 30-minute wait. Well, that's better than this. I mean, nothing seems to be going on here. So I told Philip, come on, let's go. And so we go from Thomasville, drive up towards Greensboro, get on 220, head back down to Asheboro. We get there, and you would have thought they were giving away money. And there are people everywhere, and there was nowhere to park. And so I let Philip out, and I said, go get in line. I'll try to find some place to park. And so I found somewhere finally to park. And by the time I'm getting ready to turn the car off, he comes back over there, and they said the line is so long already, they're not taking any more walk-ins today, and so they're not doing any, there's no use. And so I was like, all right, we will not be outdone. So we've had strike one, strike two, let's go to Greensboro. And so I looked on the app, which location has better time according to the website. And so it says the East Market location, 30 minutes. Okay, great. I don't know if you're aware of this, and I don't know if you're surprised by this, but the state does not keep that information up to date. So when the wait was less than 30 minutes, that might have been, I don't know, in 1987, but it has nothing to do with what's going on now. And so we get to the East Market location, and the line does go out the door, but it doesn't look like it's that long. And so we're thinking maybe there's some promise. I don't know if you've been to the East Market location, but there's a whole lot of seats inside as well. And so it's packed inside, the line goes outside. Finally, he was able to talk to someone. I don't remember how long we were there, but they said, listen, by the time that it's your turn, there won't be any time to be able to do a driving test today. So I'm so sorry, but you won't be able to get this today. So that's strike one, strike two, strike three. But it's like The Price is Right with Bob Barker when it was hole in one or two. And so we're going to get strike four. I'm not going to be outdone. And at that point, we go from East Market. I said, let's go to Kernersville. And so we head from East Market to Kernersville. Again, apparently there was another sale on free money. And it looks like you have stomped a fire ant nest, and there's people everywhere. And there's a DMV employee out there saying, we're not taking any more people today. At this point, it's roughly 4:30, and I'm kind of shocked. I don't have any more options. I've tried everything I can possibly do. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, and so we went home that day empty-handed. And I remember thinking this question though: if I had just stayed in Thomasville. Now that line was going slow, but if we had not left, because I logged more than 100 miles. I have driven multiple counties. I mean, it's ridiculous what I've done. He's missed more than half of a day of school, And so we've been through all this. If we had just stayed there and waited, if we had just waited, maybe we wouldn't be going home. In fact, likely we wouldn't be going home empty-handed. But why didn't we wait? Because waiting stinks. I mean, in any of its forms, we don't like that. You don't want to wait on a tax refund. You don't want to wait to see your doctor. You don't want to wait at the DMV. You don't want to wait for the next cashier. We don't want to wait for anything. Waiting stinks. And so just intrinsically, any way that we can possibly operate is going to lead us to try to ensure that we don't wait. We go from this line to that line. We call a different office. We go to a different location. We do all of these things because we don't like waiting. That's nothing new. And it's not simply that it's not anything new for people. It's also not true for the people of God. And one of the things that you realize very early on in the relationship with the Lord is this, that he's not like me. He is not like you. He does things differently than we do. And his ways, the Bible tells us, they are not our ways. That means that as he acts and as he operates, he's not only not going to do so in the same fashion, but he's also not going to do it on the same time frame that we may, if we were in that position, that we may prefer, that we may want. And so we're going to find ourselves waiting on God. And as we find ourselves doing that, many times, do you know what we'll do? Exactly what I did at the MV. I'm not going to wait here. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to somehow not wait, and I'm going to experience the solution. I'm going to experience what I want. I'm just going to do so outside of the experience of waiting, and specifically waiting on God. What leads us to do that? Why exactly do we operate that way? That's what we're going to think about today as we continue looking at the life of Abram, but we're specifically looking in this series that we're calling Fall Hazard, this guy that's described in Hebrews as an example of faith. This guy who's a man of faith is also a man that's characterized by a number of failures. And we're going to see one both he and his wife make today when they decided, like unfortunately too many times today, we're just not going to wait on God. And hopefully if we can figure out why we're doing this, maybe we can stop doing what I talked about earlier. We'll quit honking the horn and we'll actually choose to wait on him. Look with me. Why don't we do this? Look with me in your Bibles to Genesis chapter 16. Genesis chapter 16. We're told in verse 1 that Abram's wife Sarai had not borne any children for him, but she owned an Egyptian slave named Hagar. Sarah said to Abram, "Since the Lord has prevented me from bearing children, go to my slave. Perhaps through her I can build a family." And Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So Abram's wife Sarai took Hagar, her Egyptian slave, and gave her to her husband, Abram, as a wife for him. This happened after Abram had lived in the land of Canaan for 10 years. He slept with Hagar, and she became pregnant. When she saw that she was pregnant, her mistress became contemptible to her. That's to Sarai. And Sarai says to Abram, "Look, you are responsible for my suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and when she saw that she was pregnant, I became contemptible to her. May the Lord judge between me and you." And Abram replies to Sarai, "Here, your slave is in your hands. Do whatever you want with her." And Sarai mistreated her so much that she ran away from her. What we have here is what is technically called a hot mess. And this hot mess, this dumpster fire, is experienced for precisely the same reasons that you and I experience some similar, although the specifics may differ, are some of our own hot messes. And it's because we won't wait on God. Why don't we do that? What may prompt me? What may lead me to not wait on him? Well, based on this passage, I think there's some things that were not just true for Abram, but they're also true for us, and that's this. I will project on God my limitations. I will project on God my limitations. Now, as we've looked at the life of Abram and Sarai, and you know they're going to become Abraham and Sarah, but early on, God has established this relationship with Abraham, and he's made him an amazing promise. He said that I'm going to make you and Sarah the leaders, the founders of a great nation. There is this enormous progeny, this enormous lineage that is going to come from you. In fact, go look at the stars in the sky. That's how numerous your descendants are going to be. And hearing this, Abraham thinks and Sarah thinks, I don't know about that because we're a little old. because at that point, Abraham was 75, Sarah was 65. By the time we get here to chapter 16, how old are they? 75 and 85. Why? Because how many years have passed? 10 years. Now remember, God has said to Abraham, he said to Sarah, you are going to, and I'm going to open your womb, and you are going to have a child. And hearing this, they're thinking, okay, all right, this is somehow going to happen. Don't know exactly how. This is unusual. This is uncommon. This is, for us, nothing short of a miracle. So somehow, some way, this is going to happen. And so this childless couple is going to be the genesis of a great nation. Okay, well, if that's going to happen, you're going to have to do it. And so they begin to wait. And they're waiting for this to happen, and weeks pass, months pass, years pass. A decade passes. And let's just be honest and say a decade, 10 years is a long time to wait. If I had been sitting in the car for 10 years waiting on Caroline to come out, I would have been really laying on the horn, right? And so they've been waiting for 10 years. So for us as the reader, we can look and say, well, I kind of get it. But what's going on? In verse 1, they realize, they pay attention to the obvious, that what we anticipated, what we had hoped was going to happen, has not happened. That there is going to be generations that come from us, that progeny is going to come from us. But she says, well, since the Lord has prevented me from bearing children, what's she doing? She's saying, since God hasn't done what he said he was going to do, here's what we should do. And so she says, take my servant Hagar. We don't know exactly how old she is, but it seems that she's significantly, and likely significantly younger than Sarai. And so she says, well, with her, maybe you can conceive a child, and that could be the heir. And that could be the way all of this happens. Now, something I want you to notice, though, that the passage tells us, though, in verse 3, is something, I think it's an important detail about Hagar. It tells us that she's an Egyptian. Well, why is that notable? Because it answers this question: where exactly did she come from, and how did she come to have a relationship with Abraham and Sarah in the first place? You remember when a few weeks ago we were looking at when they go down to Egypt. God didn't tell them to go to Egypt, but there was a famine, and they decided, well, we better take care of ourselves. We better go to Egypt. And so in the absence of God's direction, they go to Egypt. As they're getting ready to go into the nation of Egypt, Abraham says, Sarah, you're really good looking. It's not going to go well for me if people think that we're married, so we'll just say that you're my sister, and then we'll be okay. And you remember what happens. They discover that she is beautiful. She gets brought into the Pharaoh's harem, made one of the Pharaoh's wives, and Abram is given what? He's given this massive dowry, as if he were her father and he were paying to have her hand in marriage. And so there's all these animals that are given to to Abraham. But beyond that, we're told that there's all these servants that are given, these slaves that are given to Abraham. When he leaves, he takes all that stuff with him. And so he has this woman, he has this servant, this slave is part of their life because of a mistake that Abraham has made, because they decided we're not going to be forthcoming, we're not going to be honest, we're not going to trust God. And so they wind up with this slave, and they figure, well, this blessing has come into our life. We made a mistake, we had some lemons, and so now we can make lemonade out of this. I need to realize this, that just because something comes into my life and it seems good, that it seems to be a blessing, everything that seems to be a blessing is not. They're probably thinking, Abraham is thinking, Sarah is probably thinking, well, God somehow gave us this servant. And so maybe somehow this is the way that he's going to fulfill that promise. And so we've been waiting 10 years. This hasn't happened. So Abraham, you do what you've got to do. And so this happens because of what? They decided, well, the clock is ticking. I was 65 when this started. I'm 75. This doesn't look like it's going to happen. I'm too old to do this. I'm too old to experience this. This cannot happen. God said it was going to, and since he hasn't done it, I had better do something myself, because it doesn't seem, and she doesn't say this, but it seems that her choices, her recommendation to Abram is rooted in this notion. Well, it could become too late. My biological clock is almost through ticking. It may be already past. It is just too late, and so we'd better do something. Sarah believed, Abram seemed to believe, these are the limitations that we have, and we cannot continue to wait on God because, well, these are the limits. And what they do is they project on God the limits that they experienced. I have these biological limits, so God can't do anything. It gets to a point where it's too late. I have these physical limits, and so God can't do anything. I have these relational limits, so God can't do anything. We have all of these circumstances where we will say, well, we just can't wait. We're not going to wait, because many times we are projecting on God our own limitations. We're taking a great big God and we're making him small, just like us. January the 1st of 1962 was not just a celebratory day in the sense that it was the beginning of a new year, but it presented Decca Records with a significant opportunity. It's a strange day for a group or individual to audition, but Decca Records was one of the biggest publishing labels in the world at that point. And a major executive with Decca had this scruffy bunch of young guys that wanted to audition for Decca to possibly sign them. And so they performed 15 songs. So that's a stack of songs. And so they have gone through all of these songs. Some of them were covers, some of them were originals. And after hearing this Decca executive says to their manager, guitar groups are on the way out, and this group has no future in show business, as he sent the Beatles packing. And that same day, he instead signed Brian Poole and the Tremolos. Everyone's favorite band, ladies and gentlemen, Brian Poole and the Tremolos. But what he did was to say, listen, from my perspective, my position, my awareness, my sense of it is that this type of music, there's no future for this. This is not the future. This is how things are in the present. This is how things actually are. And he projects his preferences. He projects his perspective onto this group. And Decca Records completely misses out on signing the Beatles. I mean, a group that was going to effectively help spawn a cultural revolution. This would have been huge for them, and they missed it. Why? Because he says, there's nothing here. Listen, that's effectively what Sarah does. That's effectively what Abraham does with God. They're projecting on God. Well, there's no opportunity here. There's nothing that can happen. It's too late. We are too old. Too much time has passed. And so we can't continue to do this. We can't continue to wait. We've got to do something. And so they took a great big God and said, well, he's kind of like me. He's kind of like you. He's got these limitations, and it gets to the point, for me, it's too late. It must be too late for God. We'd better do something now. So in your circumstance, in my circumstance, unfortunately, we will find ourselves making those same decisions. We will project on God our physical limits, our limits of perspective, our economic challenge, all of these things. We'll say, okay, God, this is the limit, and so I can't wait because this is all that I'm working with. That must be all that you're working with. And then we will act, and then the dumpster fire starts. Why? Because we project on God our limitations. But there's something else that we are prone to do, and that's this. We will project on ourselves God's abilities. We will project on ourselves. I will project on myself God's abilities. All right, so essentially what they have done initially is to take a great big God and make him small. And now what they are doing with themselves is to take little old self, little old me, and make me really big. They've essentially said, God, it is too late for you to be able to do something. We've got to do something. And whatever we come up with, it will be just as good as if you had done it. And so she says to Abram, since the Lord has prevented me from bearing children, take my slave, perhaps through her we can build a family. I love how verse 2 ends. Abram agreed to what Sarah had said. I mean, if you insist, way to go, Abraham. Well, you twisted my arm. It doesn't seem like Abraham does anything in terms of offering protest. He doesn't say, wait a minute, hold up, we need to think through this. As soon as Sarah suggests this, it's okay, Hagar. Anyway, so he begins to act, and she suggested this. He heeds her suggestion, and so she winds up, Hagar, getting pregnant. And at this point, initially, it seems that there has been a problem, there's a solution. We wanted an heir, we've got an heir. This was not completely unusual that you could effectively, and there were other cultures as well that operated this way. If you had a couple that was childless, they could take a servant and conceive with them, and that would become the heir of the family line. And they would take up the family name as if they had been born in that family. So Abraham and Sarah, they think we can do this. That's what happens. And so she gets pregnant, she conceives, and they thought, okay, this solution is great. We've had a problem, we fixed it. We wanted lineage. God said he was going to give us lineage. That hasn't happened, and so we can make it happen, and we can do so in ways that are completely satisfactory. We essentially can come up with a solution that's just as good as God's solution. But how good was the solution? Well, as soon as this happens, we're told that all of a sudden, at the end of verse 4, her mistress became contemptible to her. And so Sarai has had an easy, affable, pleasant relationship with Hagar. The home has been peaceful. There hasn't been struggle and strife and contention. And now all of a sudden, she sees her and she feels nothing but contempt and hatred and dislike, and she just gets under my skin. And so relationally, things begin to sour between Hagar and Sarai. And then she looks at Abram and she says, you are responsible for my suffering. This is your fault. Even though Sarah is the one that suggested this, Abram's the one that has acted, and so now she's wagging her finger at Abraham. And so not only is there a challenge in the home relationally between Hagar and Sarai, the relationship between Abram and Sarai is also now threatened and challenged, so that she's furious with him. In fact, not only does that happen, but Abram, he tries to console her and says, well, just deal with her however you want to the point that Hagar actually leaves. She runs away. She's treated so miserably and so horribly. So relationally, things sour. They thought, well, our solution will be just as good as if God came up with it. But what happens? In the immediate context, things go from pretty quiet and calm to stressful, distressful, and miserable. They go from experienced peace to there's all this conflict. That happens then. But what happens generationally? We've talked about this before. Likely you're aware of this, that the child that is born becomes the head of another great nation. And it is of another people group. And that it is because of that we are still in 2025 witnessing the struggle between Arabs and Jews. How long has this been going on? For in excess of 4 millennia. Why? Because they thought, all right, we can come up with a solution and it'll be just as good as if God came up with it. We've been waiting, clock is ticking, time's a-wasting, it's getting too late, so we'd better do something, and whatever we come up with, it'll be just as good as if God did. So initially, they took big God, made him small. Now they took little me, little self, and made him big. We can come up with something that's just as good as if God did it. You know, we're really good at coming up with bad solutions. Let me give you one of them. This is, it's actually a guitar pick holder. This one's Caroline. She and Philip both have the same one. But it is actually a cane-toed frog that he's no longer with us. And his body has been leathered, and put some little marbles in there so he can look at you. But anyway, and then you put the picks, well, in the back of the frog. And so, but that's a guitar pick, case, holder. Why in the world would they come up with a pick holder using these big old frogs? Well, they needed to do something with these things because in 1935, Australia realized we've got a problem. And the problem is that their sugarcane crops were being threatened by cane beetles. And so they're thinking, if we don't get rid of these beetles, well, we're going to lose this precious commodity. And so all of our crops are going to be eaten. We're going to lose stacks and stacks of money. And so we need to somehow deal with these. And so, again, this is 1935. They didn't probably have insecticides that we have today. And so they decided what we can do is we can take and introduce a predator that's not known to this area, but this frog will eat those beetles. Because frogs, after all, like bugs. And these beetles, they will be delicious. They will love this frog. Now, the problem is they introduce this frog, the cane toad, expecting it's going to eat all the beetles. The problem is that the beetles were at the top of the sugar cane. What can the frog not do? Well, it can't get up to the sugar cane. The other thing is these things are poisonous. It has no natural enemies in Australia. Combine that with the fact that they are as prolific as Owenses. And so you wind up with all of these gobs of cane toad frogs that are still a problem in Australia today. Why? Because they came up with a perfectly logical, reasonable solution, not having any idea what was just around the corner. So much so that they get so populated, we got to do something with them. Let's kill as many as we can, and, well, let's make a pick holder out of them. Listen, when you and I come up with solutions, we do so with a complete, utter lack of awareness of what's just around the corner. Abram and Sarah came up with a solution, having no idea what was just immediately around the corner. They had no idea what it was going to do to their marriage, what it was going to do to their household, what it was going to do, what had been an affable relationship with a servant. All of that is now at the window, to say nothing of a generational conflict that has been going on for multiplied millennia. And why did that happen? Well, we'd better do something. We can't wait. We'd better do something. We'd better act. And whatever we come up with, it'll be just as good. Why? Because we take God's abilities. God can do great things. Well, we can too. And so we'll project on ourselves God's abilities. I'm telling you, every time we do that, we wind up with a cane toad frog. Every time we do that, we wind up with a mess. Abram and Sarai wound up with a terrible mess. Why? Because they made God too small. They made themselves too big. They decided that they would project on God their limitations and project on themselves God's abilities, instead of just saying, He's greater than me, He does things differently than me, at a different time than me, and whatever He does, it is always, always, always good, even if I have to wait. Even if I have to wait. Will you bow your heads with me?